This week, we welcome Tom Rowe, Director of Systems Engineering from ExtraHop, to discuss how to accelerate zero trust adoption with end-to-end visibility and increased collaboration. In the Leadership and Communications section, boards rethink incident response playbook as ransomware surges, how CISOs and CIOs should share cybersecurity ownership, how CISOs are building a modern cybersecurity partnership, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Cyber risk and compliance automation is finally here. Legacy GRC systems cannot support the powerful, real-time automation and oversight that organizations require to take risks that matter to succeed. CyberSync continuous control automation ingests data from the IT GRC stack to update controls against regulatory requirements and risks in real time, delivering insights and visibility. See how members of the Fortune 500 are saving millions annually by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync. Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 232, recorded September 20th, 2021. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado. Joining me remotely are my co-hosts. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Welcome,
hey,
Jason.
Matt, how goes? Good week 2 of NFL. Your Broncos won, my Pats won. Not a bad weekend.
I know. Not a bad weekend at all. And my second co-host also got a win this weekend. Mr. Ben Carr, your Cowboys had a nice win this weekend.
Yeah, that always helps. Hey, Matt, how's it going? Good to see you again.
Good seeing you. Yes. Week 2 for Ben Carr, everybody. You're going to see a lot more of Ben.
Week 2 in the books.
InfoSec World 2021 is proud to announce its keynote lineup for this year's event. Hear from Robert Herjavec, plus heads of security at the NFL, TikTok, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Stanford University, and more. Plus, Security Weekly listeners save 20% on digital pass registration. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register now. Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person this December 5th through 7th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. We're excited to announce our first round of speakers. Visit securityweekly.com/unlock to register and check out our rockstar lineup. This segment is sponsored by ExtraHop. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Tom Rowe currently leads the public sector technical team at ExtraHop Networks as Director of Systems Engineering. He has spent most of his 20-year career looking at networks, protocols, and packets in one way or another. Tom has a passion for utilizing data-driven techniques to solve the complex problems faced by modern IT practitioners. When he's not working with ExtraHop's expansive customer base, he is deeply involved in developing and defining automated techniques for threat detection and currently holds 2 patents related to passive network detection techniques. Tom, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Looking forward to it. How's everyone today?
Oh, we're doing great. We did a lot of passive network detection work at Tenable, so one of these days we'll have to get into your patents and kind of see what you did there. A little unique, knowing Tenable holds some interesting patents around that technology too. But we're going to talk zero trust. And what I like about this segment is when people say zero trust, I always ask the question, zero trust identity, zero trust network, zero trust data, zero trust application, all the above, none of the above, because zero trust is used so many places. I think the challenge is sometimes defining zero trust. So, Tom, let's start with, what is zero trust?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and I think the industry has made really good strides of defining what it is. I mean, to your point, like it's all of the above. It is identity, it is network, it is cloud and privilege and permission. So it's all of the above. If you take a look at a lot of the standards put out by some of the various public agencies and standards bodies, I think there's been a lot of progress here over the last 6 to 9 months. Some of the frameworks that have been put forth by agencies like NIST have basically defined exactly what you're talking about. That zero trust consists of, the devices themselves, the users and identity, the network infrastructure itself, and more importantly, the data itself that's running across the networks. And so, zero trust is really a framework, so to speak. It's not a single product that you go and buy. There's some really good documentation that's been put out by both NIST and the GSA that basically does kind of break it down into individual pieces and parts. And I think a lot of it's still kind of coming together, getting finalized. But so a lot of zero trust efforts, I think, from my experience, are still in the very early stages right now, still being planned and thought about. But obviously, with the whole pandemic over the last 18 months. The work from home movement and certainly any and all of the cyber breaches and attacks that have proliferated over the last couple of years. I mean, the time for zero trust is now, and I think that the industry is responding to that both on the vendor side and I think that there is an appetite for it from the enterprise networks, those folks of you that are out there that are trying to run and operate and secure our enterprises.
So I want to double click on one thing because I love what you said. It's a framework. It's not a single product. Now, there are some vendors out there that would like it to be their product, but let's back that up for a second, because when you think about what's happened in the public sector around the executive order and this requirement to move to zero trust, it's not just a simple implement a product and we are done with this discussion, right? This is like, how are the agencies trying to get their arms around this concept of they need to be zero trust moving forward? I mean, how do you tackle this in one of the large agencies? Because this can't be a simple thing.
No, but certainly not. Interestingly enough, I think one of the biggest things that agencies are struggling with right now is understanding where they are and what their current state is. And this is an age-old problem that is not just a part of zero trust, but you need to understand the users that you have. Again, users, devices, networks, infrastructure, and data. And once you have a good understanding of what you have, then you can understand the different pieces, parts, and tools. And you might be looking at products from 4, 5, 6, 8 different vendors to piece around it. And maybe you don't need every single piece. Maybe you don't need a CASB. Maybe you don't need SASE, but you need individual pieces of the whole puzzle. But it starts with that foundational knowledge of what do you have? What are you responsible for? And unfortunately, I think a lot of our enterprises struggle to have that type of information at the ready.
Yeah, and honestly, the more zero trust became a buzzword in the industry, right? The deeper myself and the teams looked into it, and we're saying these are a lot of the basics that we needed to implement 10, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah, they're just becoming policy, framework, best practice, and they're being evangelized a lot more. But as you start looking at it, I mean, a lot of the items are core basic things that we should be doing. Asset management, know what you have, right? Know your assets.
Yeah, Tom, I'm interested to know, do you see that the market is actually, the vendors are actually running at this in the wrong way and essentially running at the problem saying, hey, I've got the solution and it's zero trust, when it really is more of, process and putting controls in and frameworks. And, we've got vendors that are trying to address these as a kind of a panacea. And so it's kind of taking a lot of companies down either the wrong path or confusing them because they're not getting kind of the holistic picture of this.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I think if you look at the vendor ecosystem, I mean, I think you've got two types of vendors. I think you've got the vendor A that, hey, we can do everything. We'll just take all of our product suite, all of our acquisitions and everything, and we'll just do it all. And you're kind of fitting what you have. Here's the solution. You're trying to fit it backwards into a problem. And then I think you have the other type of vendor, I don't know, dare I say it, the smaller, more nimbler, more focused companies, startups and the like that tend to work within a best of breed ecosystem. My employer, ExtraHop, I would say I would put in that bucket. We're not going to sell you an all-encompassing suite of products that's going to do everything for zero trust, but certain pieces of the zero trust foundation and pillars we fit very well into. So, yeah, I think. I guess to your question, I have seen some really good guidance out of some of the think tanks on the public sector side. We've done some pretty close work with some of those 3 and 4 letter agencies from a framework perspective. So there is good collaboration across the public sector, a little bit of commercial enterprise involvement in that. So, but I think the overarching architecture is being driven pretty well cross agency in the public sector, and they have involved a lot of the bigger vendors as part of those conversations as well. So I think it's coming together, but it's taking time, because like you said, it would be easy if it was just, hey, go implement a new firewall or a new IDS or something like that. But it's not just security. It is about.
But it's funny how many companies try to do that, right? I mean, it seems like a company will run after and just pick a product, right, or pick a technology and try to implement it without actually doing the planning and the policy work that's really key to making it effective in the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I think what's more challenging in the public sector is people are going to chase the money, right? I mean, think about this for a second.
100%.
You've got an executive order coming down from the President of the United States that basically says, hey, all agencies, you need to become zero trust. And you're starting to see some money in the budget. So everybody's chasing the dollars. Now they're like, oh, we're a zero trust vendor because that's where their money is.
Yeah. And there's still just enough, there's enough vagueness and enough gray area within zero trust where anybody that makes a cybersecurity product can say that they do something in zero trust at this point. And so, yeah, it's been 18 months since I've been to a real trade show. But if you were able to walk the floors of an RSA or one of the bigger shows like that right now, I guarantee you every single booth would have something about zero trust on it. So
chase the shiny ball, right?
Exactly.
Totally. Yeah. And honestly, it's the say easy, do hard, but it is the process, it is the framework, it is the best practices that are going to make us successful, because we talk about it on the show all the time. Without that, you just have a shiny product, a blinky light, and you're not going to get the adoption rates that you need to be successful.
Exactly.
The place that I have a question is, we've been talking on this show so many times about the trends in the C-suite, the CIOs, the CISOs, trying to consolidate tools. Right? So now you have these big vendors saying, I can do it all for you when it comes to zero trust. That's going to, I think, raise some eyebrows and say, maybe I can consolidate tools. But is that the best thing? Right? Because the conversation we're having right now is some of those niche players have to play in this arena in order for you to be successful. So it's that conundrum that we're running into: consolidate product line or go best of breed? Or is it a hybrid approach?
Yeah. I mean, you could get pretty firm religious beliefs on both sides of that argument. I mean, I do still think that, the big, large, monolithic vendors, are crafting a solution and working backwards to a problem from there. So, even though they may not have all the different widgets and aspects of the solution, they're going to make it sound like they are. So, to put some stuff into perspective. So where I work at ExtraHop, we make an NDR solution that's packet centric. Deployment, think like a passive sensor, so to speak. There are a lot of large vendors out there that will roll out zero trust solutions and the like without any type of network or packet level granularity, and they'll spin it. So yeah, it's a problem, I guess, but that's that's what keeps us all employed, at least from my perspective. I mean, I spend all my time educating customers and enterprises and trying to understand what problems are and where and how my solution might be able to help fit that problem and solve that problem for you.
Yeah, I think one of the things that came out from the first part of the discussion was know what you have, right? We're back to asset management 101, right? I mean, a problem we've all struggled with for 20 plus years. Like, what is on my network? What do I have? Where are my users? Where are all my assets? I mean, this has just been a huge challenge.
Doesn't it always go back there?
Yes.
That's the source of everything.
Yeah.
It is. So how, but like, how do you realistically start to build an inventory? We know the CMDBs don't have the latest and greatest. Is there a technological way to start to identify where your inventory is? Because when you look at the framework we just laid out, it's devices communicating on a network or the internet with user interaction across those to different applications and data. I mean, so it's a big problem. Is there a solution? Is there a way to approach the asset management problem? Because that's the foundation for zero trust.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like to think of the problem, and this goes to whether I'm talking about zero trust or any type of network or security operations. I like to think about the data first. So I work for ExtraHop. We make a network-centric tool that you plug in a sensor, it watches network traffic passively, and out comes a bunch of telemetry and data. Now, there are other ways to collect data as well. Folks out there that use various SIM technologies. Everybody has a SIM, right? So you can go throw agents on servers. You can go forward, machine data, logs, NetFlow, and the like. I mean, all of that data is important, but there are some inherent challenges in some of those other data collection techniques. Nobody likes to stick agents on servers or client machines, for that matter. I was working with a client 6 months ago, and there was literally 12 different agent processes running on the endpoint. Now, you're never going to be able to get away from that, but can we lessen our reliance upon agents themselves? And so, I am biased because I've spent the better part of my career, utilizing network telemetry in one way, shape, or the other. I've spent more time in Wireshark than I can shake a stick at. But yeah, I mean, as change inherently occurs in the environment, inevitably the network is going to be the place that picks it up. And if there's one thing that we can be assured of in today's enterprises and today's user base and the application base, is change is inevitable, whether it be what the users are doing or how the applications are built. Applications are now using all these crazy, PaaS and SaaS capabilities and container-based mechanisms to where, applications are being updated multiple times a day. And there's just so much change that's going on. You've got to have some mechanism to be able to capture that change and report upon that change.
So network does give us visibility to a big chunk of this. Once I have that asset data, now you got to. Step 2 is always a fun one for me. So inventory and then classification. Like, how important is this device, this data, this user, this application, et cetera, right? Because if we're going to talk about business risk when we're talking about risk management, because we talk a lot about risk management, but those are like the two basics. Like, inventory the assets that I have, do some level of classification so I can put some risk metrics around some of those things. I mean, if I get the inventory, I still got to do the classification part. So, now I've got two big process steps getting in the way of my zero trust deployment. How do I solve the classification problem?
Yeah, well, you're getting into the whole, how do I make sense of all this data now? And again, I think that problem, I think most enterprises nowadays they've deployed SIMs. They might be doing some large scale PCAP collection with sensors and the like, but they have all this data. But now the challenge is, how do I make sense of it? I've got 8 racks of SIM gear deployed so that I can store the last 6 months worth of logs. But is anybody truly getting value out of that? And I think that's the situation that a lot of enterprises are at. It's not that they don't have the data; it's that they can't interpret the data. So, I think when I think about the problem, first I think about the data. Some enterprises don't have any of the data, but once you have the data, you need to make sure you're utilizing the right people, processes, and products, for that matter, to be able to make sense of that data. And at least on the product side, again, I'm biased because I work for the sponsor of this podcast here today, but having tools that can give you immediate insight into it and not require you to manually sift through a bunch of logs or download packet captures and the like. It's great to be able to do that when you need to, but you know, and that inevitably brings you into the topic of machine learning and behavioral analysis. And you know, I think the term ML gets overused, but what I do think is that there's been some pretty good strides in the industry over the past several years towards bringing more intelligence to the vendor ecosystem, to the products that we, you know, deploy and put in our environments. You know, some are better than others, but most of the stuff that you're seeing out there now, you know, particularly on the vendor side and some of the newer open source stuff, it's light years beyond, you know, what we had 20 years ago. So, yeah, and that kind of brings us back full circle around into zero trust. You know, we've talked about users, devices, networks, and data. You know, one of the key pillars of zero trust is visibility, telemetry, and effectively knowledge. You know, I think, you know, best of breed practice that we preach here at ExtraHop is again, not only having the data, but having true insight, like having reports and dashboards that are meaningful, that I can go in with a single button click and get some immediate knowledge out of, bring up a map of my network right away. Like that's going to allow us to, you know, make decisions confidently, to put architectures in place for zero trust, to solve problems when they need to occur, or to troubleshoot, you know, issues and breaches when they occur. You know, I go back to December when the sunburst, the SolarWinds breach occurred. And we worked with tons of customers that, you know, had ExtraHop in place, and you know, literally within a button click or two, you know, it's like we're giving people full insight into whether or not they had any of those compromised SolarWinds servers. So.
And where do you think automation and orchestration falls into zero trust? Because that's a lot of conversations I'm having with customers too, right?
Yeah.
Is we're looking at zero trust from an identity, endpoint, data, app, network, right, infrastructure. But then what do you layer on top of that? The visibility and the telemetry, but then automation and orchestration to be able to execute quickly, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the visibility and telemetry naturally plugs into the automation. So I think, you know, if you go out and go poll, say like the NIST framework, you'll see like these 5 vertical pillars. I think we were going to try to have a graphic, but we don't have it here. But I think the visibility and telemetry kind of persists across all of the different entities in zero trust, and I think automation does as well. Now the one thing I'll caveat on the automation front is you know, don't go into the automation story. Actually, I would say go into the automation story eyes wide open. You're not going to be able to automate every single thing, you know, within your cyber practice. And I think folks that come in deploying some EDR or NGAV, you know, NDR solution and expecting it to just automatically fix everything, like that's, you know, the state of the technology is not at that point. And I don't know if it'll ever be at that point, but you can automate a lot. You just can't automate everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. I mean, I've seen organizations want to go into monitor mode for months at a time before they would execute on any type of orchestration because they don't want to bring the business down, right?
Exactly.
They don't want to take that chance. So they're monitoring constantly. And then what they're doing is they're aligning with the business units to say, hey, I'm seeing this telemetry. How should we react? Because it's the business unit ultimately that has that data. So, I mean, in that 800-207 special publication from NIST, you know, it goes through a pretty good strategy for implementation. And one of the pieces of the strategy is business process review, risk assessment, and policy development with the business, right? Mm-hmm. So aligning to the business and knowing their needs and knowing what's going to cripple them is important. So you're not, you know, putting in automations or orchestration that could stop the business from running.
And that goes back to the beginning, right? I mean, people trying to implement a technology without understanding the process and what the eventual outcomes are, right? I think that modeling is really important to try to figure out what are the use cases we're trying to solve for, and then putting in automation where it makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's
the early days. Yeah, I was going to say, Tom, like in the early days of intrusion prevention systems, right? When we started blocking traffic and we created some issues. I mean, think about zero trust architectures and all the different pieces that are in play, right? knowing which applications are critical in running the business, knowing which users are critical and not getting their stuff blocked. I mean, these are business level discussions back to kind of that inventory and classification discussion, right? Until you know those, it's going to be hard to put certain automation steps in place to block and create this zero trust boundary.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's tons of elements. I mean, if you get into all the individual pillars one by one, that completely rely upon that, fundamental knowledge of what you have in your network. Are you going to put segmentation or micro segmentation policies in place if you don't even know what web servers should be communicating to database servers to begin with? Like, you have to have that knowledge. You can't just go in and willy-nilly start creating policies, or you're going to break stuff, plain and simple.
Yeah. And Jason, I think that 800-207 document from NIST is a really good starting point. Like, it gets into a lot of the nuances we've been talking about of all the things, one, a starting point, but also like what's involved in each of these different pillars, because there is a lot there. Granted, some vendors might have 2 or 3 of the capabilities. But I don't know that you can find a single zero trust vendor that's just going to like drop this thing on your lap and say, here you go.
I'm sure some will try, right? I mean, they're going to try to make that case, and like you said, they're chasing the money, but ultimately it's really evaluating the product to fit the outcome you're looking for. So, get those products that can build the ecosystem that you need. And you're right. I mean, that special publication that came out from NIST is a great framework, but just go into it knowing you need to align it to your business, right? And align it to your organization, and just use some of those best practices.
Definitely. Tom, any last recommendations for the audience while we have you here?
Last recommendations. I mean, to one of your earlier questions, is there a certain way or mechanism for getting insight into asset management and all the devices and users in your network? If you haven't, looked at, a passive network-based solution for what the industry now calls network detection and response, which is in some way, shape, or another kind of a next-gen IDS, I'd encourage you to go look at some of that documentation. I mean, there's plenty of industry reports out there from Gartner, Forrester, EMA, and the like. In some cases, they call it network behavior and automated detection. I never can remember that acronym, but at least according to Gartner, is the second fastest growing subsector of cybersecurity. I can't say that for some reason, but a lot of people still are not aware of it, but I think it's it's a capability that really can level up your cyber team. So that's all for me.
Tom, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
To learn more about ExtraHop or how to implement Zero Trust, please visit securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.